It's good to see everyone out again this evening. Want to mention just a couple of additional prayer requests other than the ones that we had on Sunday. It's good to see the Sickies back with us. So glad to have Emily and Tyler back with us. Of course, you all know that Matt and Allie are traveling, so do remember to pray for them. It's a rainy, windy night to be traveling, so we pray that they would be safe. I also want to remind you to be much in prayer for Miss Brenda Titus. She has surgery this coming week. And also remember Miss Augusta Smith. I haven't heard any updates on her, but she has surgery scheduled this week. So remember her, remember Miss Melody. And then we had several of Brother Derek's for y'all moved back on me. A bunch of backsliding Baptists. What's going on there? We got to have y'all slide to the front, not backslide. Brother Derek has several friends that we've been praying for. Michael Bynum, Justin Cotton, Chance Overcast, one of Emily's co-workers. And then, of course, we're always praying for our families and friends, praying for the lost to be saved, praying for services, praying for church, praying for many, many things. So if y'all would remember those things as you seek the Lord in your daily prayers. Proverbs chapter 6 tonight. We'll pick up where we left off, and we're gonna preach fast. You're gonna have to listen fast. We're trying to get out of a section. Tyler, you're already laughing at me. So again, in chapter number 6, in the last part of this chapter, we're gonna see the same pattern that Solomon has already been developing. It's the same pattern that he started in chapter 5. And this time, as we saw last week, he was talking about the pattern that we titled it was the pleasure now with the payment later. But now he's tying this back to chapter 5. And so he's returning to the subject of sensual sin. And so there's just a few more things to say about that. And of course, this is the strongest temptation that young men face. It's no exemption for young ladies, but it is the temptation that has the greatest amount of damage. And so if you're looking for a title, we're kind of following a theme. We had the honey now and the bitter later. We had the fun now and the payment later. I think we titled that one the pleasure now and the payment later, and this one we're going to title the promiscuity now and the payment later. It's all the same theme. It's variations on the same theme. It's like contemporary music. It's the same words just in a different key, right? And so let's read through our text. We're going to read a long text tonight. We're going to cover a long bit of the Proverbs here, and hopefully we're going to get out of this section into some more encouraging words next week. Solomon says in Proverbs chapter 6, verse number 20, "My son, keep thy father's commandment, forsake not the law of thy mother. Bind them continually upon thine heart, and tie them about thy neck. When thou goest, it shall lead thee. When thou sleepest, it shall keep thee. When thou awakest, it shall talk with thee. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life, to keep thee from the evil woman, from the flattery of the tongue of a strange woman. Lust not after her beauty in thine heart, neither let her take thee with her eyelids. For by means of a whorish woman is a man brought to a piece of bread, and the adulteress will hunt for the precious life. Can a man take fire in his bosom, and his clothes not be burned? Can one go upon hot coals, and his feet not be burned? So he that goeth in to his neighbor's wife, whosoever touches her shall not be innocent. Men do not despise a thief if he steal, to satisfy his soul when he's hungry. But if he be found, he shall restore sevenfold. He shall give all the substance of his house. But whoso committeth adultery with a woman lacketh understanding. He that doeth it destroyeth his own soul. A wound and dishonor shall he get, and his reproach shall not be wiped away. For jealousy is the rage of a man, therefore he will not spare in the day of vengeance. He will not regard any ransom, neither will he rest content, though thou givest many gifts. My son, keep my words, lay up my commandments with thee. Keep my commandments and live, and my law as the apple of thine eye. Bind them upon thy fingers, write them upon the table of thine heart. Say unto wisdom, thou art my sister, and call understanding thy kinswoman, that they may keep thee from the strange woman, from the stranger which flattereth with her words. For at the window of my house I looked through my casement, and beheld among the simple ones, I discerned among the youths a young man void of understanding, passing through the street near her corner, and he went the way to her house in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night, and behold, there met him a woman with the attire of harlot, and subtle of heart. She is loud and stubborn, her feet abide not in her house. Now is she without, now in the streets, and lieth in wait at every corner. So she caught him and kissed him, and with an impudent face said unto him, I have peace offerings with me. This day have I paid my vows. Therefore came I forth to meet thee, diligently to seek thy face, and I have found thee. I have decked my bed with coverings of tapestry, with carved works, with fine linen of Egypt. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love until the morning. Let us solace ourselves with loves, for the goodman is not at home. He is gone a long journey. He hath taken a bag of money with him, and will come home at the day appointed. With her much fair speech she caused him to yield. With the flattering of her lips she forced him. He goeth after her straightway, as an ox goeth to the slaughter, or as a fool to the correction of the stocks, till the dart strike through his liver, as a bird hasteth to the snare, and knoweth not that it is for his life. Hearken unto me now, therefore, O ye children, and attend to the word of my mouth. Let not thine heart decline to her ways, go not astray in her paths, for she hath cast down many wounded, yea, many strong men have been slain by her. Her house is the way to hell, going down to the chambers of death. Heavenly Father, we again come to you. Lord, we ask for your help to understand this text, to, Lord, again, put our hearts before you. Lord, we ask that you would teach us, that you would send the Holy Spirit to minister to hearts, Lord, to open minds, to speak to the area of our lives, Lord, where we need your help, we need your instruction. Lord, we ask that you would send the Spirit, and he would be our instructor today. He would use your word to correct us, to comfort us, Lord, to speak to our hearts. In Christ's name, amen. So there has been so much said from Solomon in the previous 5.5, 6 chapters that we almost don't need to repeat this, and yet Solomon repeats it so often. There's been so much said from King Solomon that he again appeals to his son, and as we start reading our text there in chapter 6 and verse number 20, what does he say yet again? It's the same words. It's over. It's like a broken record, isn't it? Chapter 6, verse number 20, he says, keep the commandments. Don't forsake the law of thy mother. He says, bind them. It's the same thing. Keep it, remember it, bind it, obey the parents' commandment. I mean, it hardly needs to be repeated. It's been like the opening section of every stanza of all of the Proverbs that we've read so far start with that very theme. But the king here continues to plead with his son. He continues to tell the son to avoid the follies that are laid before us at so many different instances. And now here in this chapter, he's again returning to what we learned earlier in chapter number 5, to avoid the folly of this smooth-talking seductress. This chapter concludes, and the next one devotes its entire message to the same theme. It's a return to the theme of chapter 5. And so the major portion of 3 consecutive chapters are a warning. And if Solomon gives us a warning in 3 chapters, I think it's important. In chapter 5, we spoke of the smooth-talking seductress, and it was her uncontrolled cravings. In the first stanza of chapter 6, Solomon warned us about the splurging son, his uncontrolled costs. In the second stanza, he mentioned the sleeping sluggard and his untapped career. In the third stanza of chapter 6, he talked about the striving schismatic and his unwise colleagues. And now in the remainder of chapter 6, the father warns us about the consequences of sensual folly. And then in chapter 7, the father warns us about the strategies of sensual folly. In other words, it is the consequences and then followed by the character. what it will cost you and what it offers you. The consequences of folly we see in the last stanza of chapter 6. The consequences of folly, or some would say it is the high price of adultery. We need not go into all the details, but insert chapter 5. I don't want to preach that sermon again, okay? In verses 20 through 26, you see this woman described under the consequences of folly. I will say, first of all, that she is a persistent prostitute. In fact, Solomon calls her that in verse 26. She's an immoral woman. She's wayward. She's promiscuous. He starts out by saying, obey the father, obey the mother, bind those commands on your neck because it will keep you. In verse 24, it'll keep you from the evil woman. This is the immoral woman. You need to be kept from her because she's a smooth talker. We learned that in chapter 5, right? To keep thee from, verse 24, the flattery of the tongue of this strange and evil woman. She's a smooth talker, so don't listen to her. In verse number 25, we see that you're not to lust after her beauty. So don't listen to her and don't even look at her. Lust not after her beauty. Why? Neither be taken, neither let her take thee with her eyelids. What did we learn in chapter 5? She tries to capture you with words. She tries to capture you with her winks. Remember? It's all about the eyelids. Don't look at her. Don't lust after her. Don't be taken with her eyelids. I looked up in 2 Kings chapter 9. In 2 Kings chapter 9, verse 30, it says, when Jehu was come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her face and tired her head and looked out at a window. Now, painted her face literally means she put her eyes in painting. That's how we would say it today if we were to translate word for word the Hebrew. She painted her eyes. She put her eyes in painting. Now, I've not paid that close attention, but, if you're in a hurry for makeup, what do you ladies do? Just guys, right? Just the liner, just the lashes, right? Why? You bat your eyes at somebody, right? I know how that works. She put her eyes in painting, and this word tired, she tired her head. It doesn't mean she slept, okay? It doesn't mean she was sleepy. It means she adorned her head. It's the new updo. She went to the hair shop. She got done up, okay? That's what it's talking about. Lust not after her beauty. Don't be taken with her eyelids. You know what she is, right? Verse 26 tells us what she is. She's a whorish woman. She's an adulteress. She's a hunter for the precious life. In other words, Solomon is telling you she's paid for her services, right? She's going to bring you to nothing. She's going to bring you to a piece of bread. She'll break you. And we said that in chapter 5, right? She will break you physically. She will break you financially. You'll be brought to a piece of bread. She's a persistent prostitute that will cost you a premium payment. That is verses 27 through 35. Verses 27 through 29 are often taken out of context, right? You've heard that. Can a man take fire in his bosom and not be burned? Can you walk on hot coals and your feet not be burned? We see that used to, discourage you from any particular situation, right? But in context, it's speaking specifically about this cost, this punishment, if you will, of going with this adulterous woman. This payment is assured like a scorching fire. Fire will always leave you scorched. In other words, Solomon says you will be burned. In verse number 27, you take this into your bosom, it will burn up your clothes. And And so I want you to remember that the clothes here was an indicator of your identity. It will scorch your very identity. Remember that in these days, the color of your clothes would identify your gender. The style of your clothes would identify your nationality. The pattern of your clothes would identify your clan, your family. And so when it burns up your clothes, it just strips away all of your identity. You have no identity left. It will burn up in verse 28. Can one go upon hot coals and his feet not be burned? So it burns your clothes. It strips away your identity. It burns your feet physically. It burns up your physical body. There is a high cost of infidelity. Verse number 29. He that goes to his neighbor's wife, whosoever touches her shall not be innocent. It means you will not go unpunished. Just like we said in chapter 5, it will cost you physically, it will cost you financially, and here Solomon says it is guaranteed. It's going to cost you. You will pay. Just remember chapter 5. Don't go there. That's what he's saying. It's important. It's the third chapter. He's talking about this in chapter 7. He says, not only is this punishment guaranteed, it will be assured like the scorch, the flaming scorching. He says it will be acute, like the scorning of a husband. In verses 30 through 35, men don't despise a thief when he steals because he's hungry. But there's nothing you can do to assuage the anger of a betrayed husband. Jealousy will always leave you scorned. In fact, Solomon wants you to know that this woman does not love you. She's using you. She used you for that piece of bread, right? Her husband scorns you because you have now invaded his most intimate, his most private stronghold. And so Solomon is drawing here this contrast from the lesser to the greater. He says there's surely a penalty for stealing. There is a penalty for being a thief. But even if you are a thief because you are hungry, men don't despise you. But if you're caught, you pay back sevenfold. It's a harsh penalty. But it's a just penalty. It's a penalty that was established in the law of Moses. It is a just penalty. And he says in verse 31, even if you give all your substance, you restore sevenfold, he shall give all the substance of his house. If it costs you everything you have to restore sevenfold, it's just, it's the payment. That payment may bring you to poverty, but shall not be despised. You'll get some understanding, right? Because people know you did that because you were starving. But you commit adultery with a man's wife. Verse 32. There's no understanding for that. This was never forgiven. Now you can be forgiven by God, but man is not as gracious as God is. This reproach is never wiped away. How do we know? Because people talk about it for years. It's talked about. It goes on and on. And even after God forgives, it goes on. And God can wipe that sin away, but man doesn't wipe that sin away, does he? It's a wound in your life. And that's what Solomon says. There is no ransom that will satisfy that jealousy. There isn't any. It causes in verse 34 a man to rage, and he will not spare. He will not spare the day of vengeance. Jesus said, whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her has committed adultery already with her in his heart. This is an invisible trap. Youth do not see it. They don't perceive it. And everything that a youth possesses should be used to avoid this trap. He must put faith in the words of his parents. How is it that you possibly avoid this trap that Solomon has laid out in chapter 5 and in this last stanza of chapter 6? Well, that's the first half of chapter 7. To circumvent folly, to circumvent this strange woman. Solomon, again, here in the opening verses of chapter 7, he repeats this same mantra over and over again. Keep my words, lay up my commandment, keep my commandments, bind them on thy fingers, write them on the table of my heart. Keep wisdom as a sister. Call understanding thy kinswoman. They'll keep you from the strange woman. They'll keep you from the stranger. Again, she's flattering with her words. It's like Solomon wants you to understand it's her words and it's her looks that are such a dangerous trap, right? And so he again repeats this same warning. Comply, conform, keep. It's amazing to me that the king demands the prince to obey. You know, our children get the idea that when I grow up, I can do my own thing. I won't have to do what mom and dad tells me. This is a king talking to his almost grown, nearly grown sons, the princes. You still have to obey. He said it over and over and over throughout these chapters that we've read. You must obey. Everybody has someone that they answer to. You must obey. You must learn obedience. Peter discusses this in 2 Peter. Paul discusses this in Ephesians, chapter 4 and 5 and 6. We all must be subject to each other. We all must submit one to another. Here, Solomon says again, comply, conform. How do you circumvent folly? First of all, embrace your schooling, those first 4 verses. Again, it's just belaboring the point over and over and over again. Chapter 7, verses 1 through 4, it's another list of 6 imperative commands. And it's the 6 imperative commands that demand this prince, you obey your parents. What does he say? Where are they? Keep my words. Lay up my commandments. Keep my commandments. Live. Bind them on thy fingers. Write them on the tables of thine heart. Say unto wisdom, thou art my kinswoman. 6 imperative commands. In other words, the king has said, you have no option here. I'm telling you, you do it, you obey it, you conform. And so I just draw this immediate applications. Your parents, the authorities that God has placed in your life, they're not here to kill your fun. Their purpose is not to destroy the pleasure now. Their total, complete purpose is to prevent the payment later. They know the high cost. They understand the payment that comes later. That's what they're trying to prevent. Sin costs you. Sin costs you a tremendously high cost. Like that song we sang. I'm not sure I remember all the words. It costs you more than you wanted to pay. It takes you farther than you wanted to go, and it keeps you longer than you wanted to stay. It was that song you sang Sunday. It's a great song. It's exactly what Solomon is saying. You don't know the cost of this sin, so stay away from it. And so in verses 1 through 4, he again, not to be repetitive or to redundant or duplicate what I've already said over again, but he says, keep my commandments, keep my words, bind them. It's just that important. He keeps repeating himself over and over again. We'll come back to that again. He says, embrace your schooling. I've been telling you, you just got to embrace this stuff. In verses 6 and 7, I titled this section, Escape Your Stupidity. Sometimes we just don't recognize how vulnerable we are. For at the window of my house I looked through my casement and beheld among the simple ones, I discerned among the youths a young man, notice this word, void of understanding. He's saying this, you have an advantage. You have an advantage that is way, way above everybody else. You have received instruction. You've had all this repetition that others have not had. And so you know, you've been warned, you've been told. Notice these words when he said he looked out the window of his house, he beheld the simple ones. And the simple ones is a youth, and it's a man that is void of understanding. That's what that simple is, right? Remember, we called this person in our introductory chapter, we called this man the foolish man. And there was two types of fools, right? These are the simple. It was a picture of the sippy cup. In other words, they didn't know better. They didn't know what she was doing. They didn't understand. They didn't know any better. They hadn't been instructed. But Solomon says, you know, you've been instructed. So if you fall into this sin, it's not because you carry the sippy cup of the fool who didn't know any better. You're embracing the snuff can of the scorner. In other words, you have the thought, not me. It won't happen to me. I know better. I can handle this. It might happen to them, but I'm better than them. I'm sneakier than them. I'm smarter than them. I'm more sly than they are. Solomon says, watch out for that attitude, because it will happen to you. It is as sure as taking fire into your bosom. It is as sure as walking on hot coals. And so in verses 8 through 12, he says, evade this snare. Here's the actions. Here's the actions that made the other guy, the other young man, get in trouble. And I picture this as if Solomon is watching. In fact, he said he's watching. He's watching out the window of my house. He's looking through his casement. And so I see, in my mind's eye, I picture this as Solomon watching this from his tower window. And it's like he's shaking his head. No, wait. No. Just stop. Not that. I mean, he knows better. He knows what's happening. But he just can't stop him. He sees the train wreck coming. And he's trying to switch the tracks. But the train won't back off the throttle. So how do you avoid the snare? Let's look at what they did. Passing through the street near her corner, he went the way to her house. Now you know the word way, the word path, the word way, the word road, the word street. They're kind of all the same thing, right? So he passes through the street near her corner, and he went the way or the road, the street, to her house. Stay off that street. I mean, really, right? Stay off that street. Do you know that there's some neighborhoods you don't need to go to? There really is a wrong side of the track. Now, I don't know in your case if it's a cluster of houses or if it's a community or if it's a neighborhood or if it's just one particular house, but whatever your temptation is, stay off that street. Just don't go there. I'm going to just be more practical. If you have trouble looking at magazines, don't go to that store. And I know, I've been in Walmart. They're there. They're just right in front of you. Take your wife with you. She'll help you not look at those magazines. Or here's one even better. You'll get some help from the manager at Walmart. When you walk up there, just pick them up and turn them around backwards and put them back. And then you won't look at them anymore while you're standing there for 20 minutes waiting for somebody else to check out. The manager might come around and talk to you, and you wince to the manager. If you have an alcohol problem, don't go to the liquor store. And some of this stuff's practical. Stay off her street. Verse number 9, in the twilight, when's that? In the evening, in the black and dark night. It's pretty simple too, isn't it? Stay home at night. You don't need to be out that late. There's sometimes you just need to be at home. When I was young, I had a curfew. I wonder why. When the street lights come on, you better be at home. When it's dark enough that the automatic street lights come on, you better be on the front porch. And when I got older, I had a little bit later curfew. And if I got close to that curfew, there better be a phone call. I had a sister that tried that once. She found out how light of a sleeper Dad was. Stay off her street. Stay home at night. Look at her identity here. In verse number 10, behold, there met him a woman with the attire of a harlot and subtle of heart. So you know how she dresses, right? Okay, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for this. Guys, don't let your daughters out of the house dressed like that. Don't let your wives out of the house dressed like that. And if somebody else is out of the house dressed like that, look the other way. I mean, do we need to go back and read chapter 4 again? You know how she dresses. It's provocative. Guys, you can be guilty of the same things, right? Verse number 10, behold, there met him a woman with the attire of a harlot and subtle of heart. So not only are we warned about how she dresses, so now we know she's got words, right? She's got winks. Now we're cautioned about how she dresses. And now how she acts. She's crafty in verse 10. Subtle of heart means she's crafty. And so remember in verse number 12, chapter 6, verse number 12, that naughty person, that wicked man, he has a forward mouth, he has winks in his eyes, he speaks with his feet. This is very similar. This is that wicked and immoral person that has you in their target. They have you that they're trying to trap. See, in the second verse there, that second stanza of chapter 6, it was generic. But now, in this first part of chapter 7, make no mistake, she's got you in her sights. She's looking down the scope and she's got it dialed in and you're in the crosshairs. Let's look at some more of her identity. Verse number 11. She's loud and stubborn. Her feet abide not in her house. Right now in verse 12 is she without. Now in the streets she lies in wait at every corner. And so Solomon says she's boisterous, she's loud, she's self-willed. This is someone that is obstinate and unwilling to change. She goes about all the time. She doesn't stay home. She's always out and about. What's 1 Timothy say in chapter 5, verse 13? They wander about from house to house. Titus chapter 2, verse 5. Paul tells Titus that the ladies should be discreet. This lady's not discreet. Should be chaste. She's not chaste. Should be keepers at home. She's not at home. It says, now is she in the streets in verse 12. Now is she in the public square. She's in the streets, in every corner. She's in the public square. And so her thought is to contradict every message and every offer of Lady Wisdom. Did you know that the temptation of promiscuity is everywhere? It is ubiquitous. I admitted to you that my computer knows that I'm a guy. You know, the mailman does too. Right? You get a gardening magazine, you get a gun magazine, look at the back of it. No, don't look at the back of it. Right? I get a number of reloading magazines. Y'all know I'm a hand loader, right? You know what my wife does? Rips the covers off of them. I'm just saying. Be protective. This temptation is everywhere. It's on every billboard. Eyes forward, men. It's in the back of every magazine. You can't watch news in the morning without averting your eyes. You guys know what I'm talking about. She's in the streets. She's in the public square. And by the way, she doesn't want you. She's not after you. She just wants to keep you away from wisdom. She doesn't want you to embrace her. She doesn't care about you. She doesn't care about your happiness. She just wants you to not embrace wisdom. Now, let me just be practical. Guys, did you ever date a girl and then the relationship went apart? Hey, it doesn't matter who broke up with who, but she got to be petty, catty. She'd call you, let out a little bit of line. Maybe there's some hope. All of a sudden, hook you and start dragging you back. Because she wasn't interested in you. She just didn't want you to have anybody else. That's what this girl's doing. She doesn't want you to embrace wisdom. This person is very much like the one that sows discord in chapter 6 and verse number 19. The one that sows discord. And so, in the remainder of this chapter, verses 13 through 27, chapter 7, verses 13 through 27, we see her conspiracies. We saw her character. We saw how to circumvent. Now I want you to see her conspiracy. Because this promiscuous woman attacks this young man, and he is unsuspecting. He's an unsuspecting boy. But she comes at him with her full arsenal. I mean, think about it this way. Solomon is speaking to his young son, and he understands that this young son is naive. But this woman is not naive. She has a lifetime of experience. She has years. Can we say it like this? Because of what he calls her in chapter 6 and verse 26. Because of what he warns against in verse 32. Can we say that she's been in the business a long time? She knows what she's doing. You got to be on the lookout. I mean, Solomon's warning this young man, you don't know what you're in for. But I'm telling you, this is a battle. This is a war. And she's coming at you with everything she's got. She's been at it a long time. She's experienced. She's been in business, right? And so, how does this foolish woman, this promiscuous woman, attack and conquer all these young men? Well, Solomon identifies for us her tactics. First of all, her tactics are seen because she's persistent in her pursuit. Look at verse 7. He beheld among the simple ones a young man that was void of understanding, and she's persistent in her pursuit because she hunts prey. She's hunting her prey as in the dark. In verse number 9, in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night, there met him a woman. In verse number 12, now is she without, now in the street. She lieth in wait. That's an ambush. She's setting an ambush for you, and this ambush is in the dark. You don't see it coming. You don't have good visibility. You just don't understand because it's dark outside. You can't see straight. And she's set the ambush. That's why you need to stay off her street. That's why you just need to not go there. That's why you need to not be out at night. Because she set this ambush for you. And what happens? Verse 13. So she caught him. He's overtaken. And she kissed him. Oh my goodness. I'm just going to be practical, guys. You're weak in the knees at that point, right? She catches him. She kisses him. And with an impudent face, she says unto him, I have peace offerings. And so he's been caught, he's been kissed, and now he's being seduced. This words here about with an impudent face, she says to him, these are strong pleadings. In other words, she is persistent. She's persistent in this pursuit. So persistent, in fact, that in verse 14, she claims to be religious. Her religious claims are a bunch of lies, though. She's just doing anything that's required to ease your conscience. She's doing anything that's required to break down your resistance. She's doing anything necessary to conquer her prey. In verse 15, she's diligent, and she says so. I came forth to meet thee. I came diligently to seek thy face, and here you are. I'm making you feel special, big guy. Right? She's making you feel special. You know how she makes you feel special? She won't take no for an answer. Hey man, I caught you. I kissed you. I'm hugging you, telling you everything you want to hear. That's what's going on here. This is what it can be. This is what it means when she says that she, with an impudent face and peace offerings, man, she's telling you everything that you want to hear, and she won't take no for an answer. So she's persistent in her pursuit. She's also persistent in her promises. Look at verse 16. I've decked my bed with coverings of tapestry, carved works, fine linen of Egypt. I perfumed my bed with myrrhs and aloes and cinnamon. What is this? Decorations that appeal to your vision. Linens that appeal to your touch. Perfumes that appeal to your scent. She uses perfume and incense and linen sheets and a fine bed and all these decorations. Hey, let me just tell you, it's a full onslaught of all of your senses. It's not just the words. It's not just the winks. It's not with her, just with how she dresses. It's everything. She's coming at you with everything, okay? All of this. All of your senses are being engaged. She's persistent in this pursuit. She's telling you everything you want to hear. She's persistent in her promises. In verse 18, she's persistent in her speech. Look at this. Come, let's take our fill of love until the morning. Let us solace ourselves with love. The good man's not at home. He's in a long journey. Notice verse 18, this speech. Does this sound familiar? Let us take our fill of love until the morning. Let's solace ourselves with love. If you need a reminder while I'm explaining some of this other stuff, you can flip back to chapter 5, verse number 19, and you can remember the intimacy of a marriage covenant. These words are reserved for the marriage covenant and lifelong intimacy. That's what she's telling you here. And so this dangerous adulteress in verse number 19, she just tells you, I'm married, but he ain't home. Hey, I'm married, but it don't matter. He's a long ways from home. And so she has entered this dangerous ground. She has betrayed her own covenant with her husband. Verse number 20, the husband is gone on a business trip. He won't be back until the new moon. We're safe. It's never going to be discovered. Again, hearken back to chapter 5. Remember in chapter 5, it was the guy that was gone on the business trip that was tempted. Well, while the guy was gone on the business trip being tempted, here we have a woman that is back home doing the tempting. And it's just not good to be gone from your spouse for too long. I mean, I know it's needed. I know it's necessary, but just don't do it too long, right? I read this week about a report. You're going to, I don't know if you'll laugh or be appalled. I read of a report this week from the BBC News. It was a report that happened 20 years ago. It was in 2002. An Israeli man went on a business trip to a resort in the town of Eilat. On his He was supposed to be there for a week. On his first night there, knowing he'd be there for a week, he made arrangements for a mistress to come. Very soon there was a knock at his door. The call girl that showed up was someone that he knew he hadn't seen in several years. It was his estranged daughter. Wow. That can make for some interesting family affairs. This man had an immediate heart attack. Literally. I mean, he had a heart attack. I don't know if he had a heart attack because he just knew that he'd been found out, or he knew that his daughter had been estranged for several years and he just discovered her employment. When he recovered from the heart attack, he canceled he went to the hospital and he was not held. He canceled the remainder of his business trip and he went home. With lots of explaining to an upset wife, obviously. The rest of the story basically said that mom intended to track down the daughter and find her a more suitable occupation. But mom and dad are divorced. And this is no joking matter, is it? And when Solomon says here that she's coming after you, young man, and she's coming with everything she's got, she's coming with every firearm in her arsenal, she's bringing out everything. He wants you to know. Jump down to verse 26. She's cast down many wounded. You're not her first. Oh yeah, I'll leave my husband, you leave your wife, and we'll get together and we'll spit wrong. No, she's cast down many wounded. This is her occupation. You're not the first one. You're not going to be the last one. Many strong men, not the puny little weak youths that are naive and innocent. She's brought many strong men have been slain. This isn't love. This is her job. I just hate to be that blunt with you. But that's how serious this is, right? In verse 19 and 20, the good man's not at home. He's on a long journey. He's taking a bag of money. He'll be home, but it's a long time from now. She's offering you safety. Again, she's telling you everything you want to hear. It's safety. But this safety is a falsehood. This safety is an illusion. Safety cannot be created. And while I'm being blunt, safety is not sold at the corner store. Safety cannot be prescribed at the local clinic. Safety only comes in the honor of a covenant marriage. And so all she has done is created an illusion that she's safe. She's not safe. She's a killer. And so with her tricks and with her fair speech, the text says, with her much fair speech, well, we need much fair speech. Why are you still listening to her? Well, whatever it is you're selling, I'm not buying. Get out of here. That cost me a job once. It did. Because I was that blunt. Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying. I'm not market. Yeah, I don't care who else. Not me, not this guy, not now, not ever. With her much fair speech, he stopped listening. She caused him to yield with the flattering of her lips. Man, how many times we've been warned about these lips? Don't listen to her. Her persistent fair talk and flattering lips have caused him to finally yield. Run from this temptation. The continual temptation of persistent exposure to this person eventually causes him to let down his guard. And I just want to jump back over to chapter 6 and tell you to read verses 12 through 19. It's the same tactics. It's the same temptations. Don't hang out with this person. Don't go around her. But he goeth after her straightway, as an ox to the slaughter. Shame, shame. As a fool to the correction of the stocks, a dart strikes his liver, a bird hastes to a snare, and knoweth not it is for his life. See, he doesn't know. He doesn't know, but this was a fatal mistake. As an ox to a slaughter, as a fool in the stocks, as a deer that shot through his liver with an arrow, as a bird that's been caught in a snare, he says there is never an escape, and this has cost you your life. That's her target. She wants you dead. She didn't want you happy. She wants you dead. Notice verses 24 through 27, her termination. This is a pernicious prostitute, and she's only after your life. But she doesn't want you just dead. She wants your spirit. You remember when we said that all of Proverbs was Solomon pointing you to the greater son of Solomon, Jesus? And wisdom personified is Christ. That's chapter 8. Wisdom speaks for herself. So we'll meet Lady Wisdom in our next lesson. But in that same analogy, this pernicious prostitute, this what verse 26 says is a whorish woman, is all of the temptations of Satan that would draw you to hell. It's everything that wants to keep you away from the Son. And so she wants your spirit. She opens the door here to a path of folly. Hearken to me now, therefore, children, attend to my words. Let not thine heart decline to her ways, her roads, right? Go not astray in her paths. She's cast down many. Many have been slain by her. Her house is the way to hell, going down to the chambers of death. She has opened the door to the path of folly. This is the road which represents all of the philosophies of life which lead to falsehood. It is self-destruction. It is away from wisdom. It leads you out of the course of wisdom. This is the way to hell. This is the road to hell. This is the path to perdition. How do you defeat this trickery? How do you avoid this temptation? Solomon says, yet again, this is like the 7th time just in this chapter. He says, hearken to my words. Hearken to me, attend to the words of my mouth. Hearken and attend. It's listen and obey. Listen and obey. Listen to your parents. That's what he's saying. I know I'm the king, and I know you're the prince, but listen to your parents. You got to obey your parents. Do not decline to her road. Do not decline to her ways. And decline is that Hebrew word for turn aside. Don't turn down that road. Don't even go down that road. Don't turn down her street. Don't go there, right? Passing through the street, near her corner, he went the way to her house. That's verse 8. In chapter 4, look at verse 27. Turn not to the right hand, nor to the left. Remove thy foot from evil. Don't go down that road. Don't even talk to her. Don't look at her. Don't look at her. Don't talk to her. Don't think about her. Don't go over there. Don't ponder it. Quit looking across the fence. The grass isn't greener over there. Just stay where you're at. Don't go into her paths. Don't be taken by her conduct. Listen, you've been warned. You know how she's going to act. You know how she's going to dress. You know how she's going to talk. You know how she's going to look. You know what she's going to say. If she happens to catch you, you know what she's going to do. There's no trickery here. You've been exposed. You've been told. So buck up now. Take the wisdom. Take the advice. And avoid this loud, stubborn, boisterous woman that just wants to kill your life. Don't be fooled. Solomon says, be on guard. There are many in verse 26 that have been wounded and slain and killed by her. Many. So here's some practical advice. You've probably heard that if something is too good to be true, it probably is, right? And I pondered this. Don't decline to her ways, for she has cast down many wounded. Many have been slain by her. You know, if you're chasing the same thing that everybody else is, if you're chasing the same girl that everybody else is chasing, you might want to reconsider. Because what Solomon indicates here in this chapter and in the previous two is that this instruction goes to an elite group. Everybody has heard this. Everybody doesn't know this. It's just a particular few that embrace this wisdom. It's the general crowds. It's everybody else that passes through the street and goes her way in the twilight, in the black and dark night. And this harlot comes out in verse 10 to meet him, and she's subtle of heart. This is where everybody else goes. And so if you're chasing the same woman that everybody else is chasing, you might want to find a different girl. Because everybody else is not wise. And so you better be wise, right? But again, remember that these are pictures for us. If wisdom is the greater son, and this whorish prostitute is all of those things that lead us away from Christ and would trap us in Satan's snare, the lion that roams about just like it is said of this woman who wants to devour us, just like it is said of this woman, then you have to recognize that this is really about Satan, isn't it? This is a picture of where Satan tries to take us. Which brings me to Proverbs 14, verse 12, and it's repeated in 16, verse 25. There's a way, there's a road, there's a street, there's a path, which seems right to a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. And so Solomon says, embrace wisdom. Don't embrace this. Embrace wisdom. This woman's house, in verse 27. This woman's house leads to hell. And if you're intimate with her, the chambers, her bedroom, if you're intimate with her, leads to death. And it's not just physical death. It's not just financial trouble and physical trouble. It's a spiritual death. And so King Solomon here has appealed to his son, keep your parents' commands. It's been said over and over and over again. If your parents had the same expressions my dad did, it's like, I've told you this till I'm blue in the face, right? Your dad ever say that? This plea has run through 3 lengthy chapters. It's been repeated many, many times. Run. Avoid. Evade this folly. In particular, in your physical life, avoid the folly of sensual sin, because it is pleasure now and payment later. It is promiscuity now and payment later. But all of this is about spiritual adultery. Don't go the road of Satan. Go the road to embrace wisdom, because she leads you to hell. Her ways are the ways of death. And if you'll embrace wisdom, oh my, what wonderful blessings. What joyous occasion. Because as we've learned, in one hand she has life, in one hand she has gifts, in one hand is riches, in one hand is wisdom. She gives. She's a generous giver. She's a loving giver. She's a faithful giver. You'll never be without if you'll embrace wisdom. But a gracious alternative that after 3 chapters, we'll meet Lady Wisdom in chapter 8. And that'll be a great encouragement. Let's stand. Brother Derek, if you'll come. If I can help you, pray with you.